this video, I'm gonna show you how 3 different countries make the dish we call curry. All 3 of these recipes are super different, packed with intense flavor, and they're all well tested, so you can feel confident making them yourself. Especially the 3rd curry. That's a dish that I don't think enough home cooks know about, and they should, because it's real sick. First up is a Thai green curry. To make it, I'll start with 1.5 pounds or about 650 grams of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I would avoid breasts for this dish because they get really dry and ropey with the cooking method that we're going to be using. If you want a leaner protein, I would say use shrimps. To prep the thighs, I'll slice them in half down the middle, then turn on my board and cut those half strips down into 6 to 8 pieces. I want chunks that are going to cook in about 4 to 5 minutes. So that means we're looking for about 1 inch wide, give or take. Next, I'll slide the cut thighs into a bowl, then I'll add in 10 grams of salt and toss that to combine. This is going to act as a quick dry brine that will season the chicken and make it stay juicy during cooking later on. Okay, now I'm going to set that aside and then quickly grab 2 medium red bell peppers and cut them down into 1/2 inch strips, then turn those 90 degrees and chop into 1 inch lengths. In total, I'm looking for 200 grams of bite-sized peppers. Next, I'll grab some snow peas and cut those in half on a bias or diagonally. And again, I'm just looking for something bite-sized here. Huge vegetables are hard to eat and most people just eat around them. Okay, now we need to make the curry paste for this dish. First, into my blender jar, I'll add 75 grams of serrano chiles. These are real spicy though, so if you're sensitive to that, use jalapenos, which are a little bit more mild, or if you're really sensitive, use poblanos. Next, in goes 30 grams of shallot, 30 grams of ginger, 30 grams of lemongrass, and 30 grams of garlic. Oh, and to make sure that these are easier to puree, I just rough chopped them first. Next, I'll add in 3 grams of cumin, 3 grams of coriander, 1 gram of turmeric, 5 grams of salt, and then 15 grams of shrimp paste. If you haven't heard of it, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a paste of little baby shrimps. Flavor-wise, it's got a little bit of a funk to it, but it's not anywhere close to the funkiness of fish sauce.
Not really something you want to eat by itself.
If you don't have it, won't buy it, or can't get it, leave it out or sub in 2 anchovy fillets. The last 2 things I'll add into this blender jar will be 10 grams of fresh cilantro and then the zest of 2 limes. I prefer zest over juice in a curry paste because you get the aroma of the citrus without the acid, which can make this dish taste a little bit too sour. Next, I'll spin things up in my blender, but this paste is too dry to break down on its own, so I'll need to grab about 50 to 75 grams of water and stream that in. I want to add water just until the blender catches the curry ingredients and things start to spin up on their own. There we go. Now I'm going to spin this for about 10 to 15 seconds more, or until things are no longer chunky. When it's done, it should look like a slightly wetter version of the stuff that you've bought from the grocery store. Now to cook up this curry, I'm going to grab a wok and drop it over high heat. Once hot, I'll add in a long squeezer of high smoke point oil, then my snow peas, my bell peppers, and a pinch of salt. From here, I'll jump in and stir fry these veggies hard for about 2 minutes. By the way, if you don't have a wok, you could saute these veggies in a stainless or non-stick pan and then build the curry in a high-sided pot like a Dutch oven. After a quick 2 to 3 minute stir fry, I'm going to move these veggies over to a bowl to hang out while I cook the sauce. As you can see, these have taken on a little char from the high heat and they've softened just a little bit, but still have their snap. Back into a hot wok, I'll add a long squiggle of oil, then I'll drop in my curry paste. From here, I want to cook off some of the water because the aromatics inside this paste won't start to take on any flavor until the water that we added is steamed off. About 1 minute later, the water's cooked off and the paste has been stir fried enough to open up its flavor. At this point, my house smells insane. It's like pure lemongrass. It's beautiful. From here, I'll add in 2 cans of coconut milk. Then I'll stir that in and bring everything up to a spirited simmer and cook for 1 minute to soften the raw aromatics in the paste. Once that's cooked, I'll add in 30 grams of fish sauce, 20 grams of brown sugar, and then all of my salted chicken thighs. Next, I'll jump in and stir to get the raw chicken submerged into the spicy coconut sauce. Then I'm going to simmer it over medium or medium-high heat for about 7 to 8 minutes while stirring it every 2-ish minutes to keep the coconut from scalding onto the wok. I'll also mention that I want to cook these thighs well past the point of just being cooked through. If we cook them a little bit harder to a higher internal temperature, some of that intramuscular fat's going to render and the texture of the chicken will shift from springy and firm to softer and more tender. And once the chicken has had time to cook through and then a little bit more, I'll add all of my vegetables back in, then stir those in and simmer everything together for 1 more minute. At this point, I'm just looking to take a little bit of the raw edge off the veggies and reduce the coconut milk another 10 to 15%. The final viscosity of this sauce should be quite a bit more saucy than it is brothy. I think an overly thin curry sauce is a mistake that a lot of home cooks make in the US. Once reduced, the final step is to taste for seasoning. I'm gonna add in a little bit more fish sauce for salty funk, then a little bit more brown sugar to help balance that salt. And then actually I need a little bit more salt, but I'm just gonna use salt and not fish sauce because I don't need any more funky fish flavor. Now I'll just give this one more taste to see if we're in the sweet spot. To serve, I'm gonna drop into a low bowl with some steamed jasmine rice, fresh cilantro, and some fresh limes. Now let's taste this thing.
Right away, you get punched in the nostrils from the lemongrass and ginger, and that's really beautiful and aromatic. And then it kind of evolves into a green chili emergency right in the middle. And then right when that's peaking and you're getting a little bit worried about the pain, the coconut milk comes in to kind of mellow everything out and make it taste much more creamy. This dish is just constantly bouncing back and forth on the spectrum between fresh and comforting. It's simultaneously like really sharp and focused, but also round and soft.
Next, we're gonna make a cozy Japanese style curry. To make it, I'll start with 1 pound of chicken thighs and then cut those down into rough 3/4 or 1 inch chunks, the same as I just did for the Thai green curry. Then I'll add in 6 grams of salt and toss the chicken with that salt for the same reason as before. Pre-salting meat makes it more juicy and makes it taste better. Next, let's bust out some knife work. For that, I'll start with 2 to 3 small Yukon Gold potatoes and slice them into 3/4 to 1 inch planks, then slice those down into batons and then chop them down into a rough dice. In total, I need about 225 grams of potatoes. Skip russets, by the way. Those tend to fall apart in this dish. Next, I'll dice 175 grams of carrots down into the same chunky dice that I did for the potatoes. For stew, in general, I like to seek out the chunkiest carrots that I can find so that I can get big pieces that cook evenly alongside these chunky potatoes. For the next bit of knife work, I'll take a package of shiitake mushrooms, de-stem them, and then cut them down into chunky squares just like I did for the carrots and the potatoes. In total, we'll need 125 grams of diced shiitakes. Lastly, I'll take 1 onion and give it a small dice. I want smaller pieces though, so that the onion will melt into the stew. In total, I want about 150 grams. Oh yeah, also grate 15 grams each of ginger and garlic on a microplane or a box grater. There we go. Knife work is all sorted out. So next, I'm gonna grab my Dutch oven and drop it on the stove over medium-high heat. While that heats, I wanna thank Element for sponsoring this vid. If there's anything in this life that I truly love, it's a refreshing beverage, especially when it's ripping hot in the summertime in St. Louis. This summer, one of the most refreshing bevies that I've been hitting is Element's Electrolyte Drink Mix, specifically their limited time lemonade salt flavor. It tastes exactly like the powdered country time lemonade that you drank as a kid, but way better. Element is all about proper hydration without any sugar or fillers, just science-backed electrolytes to keep cramps, headaches, fatigue, and brain fog at bay, whether you're an elite athlete, an occasional exerciser, or just somebody who needs a refreshing beverage to quench their thirst. Anytime I drink it though, I look forward to it like it's a treat because it tastes real good. Like I said, the lemonade salt flavor is only available for a limited time, so if you want it, you gotta grab it soon. If you use the link in my description, you'll get a free sample pack with any purchase with no strings attached. And if you're not into it, Element will give you a full refund. But trust me, you're gonna be into it. It's refreshing, it hydrates you, and it tastes good. Check it out down at the link in my description. Now, into my hot Dutch oven, I'll add a long squeezer of oil, then all of my salted chicken thighs. From here, I'm gonna spread that out into one layer and sear it hard for about 5 minutes. Starting with a sear gives us some roasty chicken flavor for the base of this dish. Since this dish is very dark in flavor, that makes sense, but I didn't sear the chicken for the green curry earlier because that dish is all about bright, fresh flavors, so you don't want dark roasty chicken flavors mucking things up. And after 5 minutes, when I come back and scrape up this chicken, you can see that I've got some hard browning going on one side, and we're starting to build up some chicken fond on the bottom of the pot. From here, I'm going to add in my onion and mushrooms and then a small pinch of salt to draw out their moisture. Then I'll jump in and saute these with the chicken for about 3 to 5 minutes to soften them both and to cook out some of their water. A couple of minutes later, some of that chicken stuff is really starting to glaze up the bottom of the pot, but if we were to leave it, it would probably burn. So at this point, I need to add in a couple of tablespoons of water and then use the side of my wooden spoon to scrape that up. That's going to help get all that nice brown flavor absorbed into the mushrooms and onions. Okay, once the onions and mushrooms have softened up and cooked down by about half, I'll add in my ginger and garlic, then saute it for 2 minutes to soften those up. The ginger especially needs some cooking to round it off and mellow out its flavor. If you don't do that, the final dish is just gonna have too much gingery heat. Next, I'll add in the fun stuff, which is 20 grams of Japanese curry powder and 10 grams of garam masala. If you're wondering how Japanese curry powder is different from Indian curry powder, well, it has the curry classics like turmeric, coriander, cumin, and cardamom, but it also has more of a warm spice flavor thanks to higher levels of clove, fennel, star anise, cinnamon, ginger, and orange peel. If all you have is Indian curry powder, that can be a fine sub. Back in the stove, I've got my spices stirred in, so next I'll add in 115 grams or 1 stick of butter and get that melted quickly. At this point, the spices are threatening to stick to the pot and burn, so we definitely need to keep things moving. Once the butter's melted, I'll add in 60 grams of all-purpose flour, then just stir that in until it's combined with the melted butter and there aren't any lumps. 1 minute later, I've got the flour stirred in, so next I'll add in 1,000 grams of chicken stock and 25 grams of instant dashi powder. If you're not familiar, dashi is like the mother stock of Japanese cooking. It's made from kombu, which is dried seaweed, and bonito, which is a smoked, dried, tuna-esque fish. This powdered stuff is available widely online or in the Asian section of most grocery stores. But if you don't have it, sub in a big spoonful of better than bouillon chicken flavor. Next, I'll bring this stew up to a simmer so the roux that we just made can start to thicken things up. And after about 2 minutes of simmering, I'll drop in my potatoes and carrots, along with 50 grams of soy sauce, 15 grams of wort, and a 40 to 50 gram squeezer of honey. Oh my god, this stew has all of the different flavors going on. Finally, I'll just stir in the roots until they're submerged, and at this point it would also be a good idea to scrape the bottom one more time just to make sure that there's no spices or roux stuck to the bottom. As we simmer this stew, those can easily get burnt or scorch. Now the lid goes on and I'll turn the heat down to medium-low and simmer this for 15 to 20 minutes, stirring every 5 minutes. Roughly 15 minutes later, when I check back, this looks like a proper stew. The starch from the potatoes and all that roux has made it nice and thick, and now it's looking really glossy. To determine doneness, I need to take a bite of a potato. For me, the perfect texture here should be tender, but still a little bit toothsome. We definitely don't want mashed potatoes in our stew. To serve, I'll drop into a low bowl next to some swollen Japanese medium grain rice and maybe a cold pint of Sapporo beer. Wow. I love this dish so much. I truly do. It reminds you of mom's stew up front, and then after a couple of seconds, it totally evolves into something different. You get hit in the face with turmeric and garam masala and the hot edge of that aromatic ginger. And then there's layers of umami from all that dashi. All these different things just build up on top of each other, and it sounds a little bit weird at first, but trust me, it is so delicious, so comforting, and honestly familiar. Most people who haven't had this dish will take a bite and instantly fall in love with it like it's something they've been eating their entire lives. The last curry is an Indian chicken curry, but not one that relies on cream or yogurt to make it delicious. To get started, I'll grab 8 to 10 chicken drumsticks. You could also make this dish with boneless, skinless thighs, but in Indian restaurants, this dish is always bone in. The first step here is going to be removing the chicken skin. That process can be a total pain, but using a paper towel to grip the skin makes it much easier. The dry paper creates a lot more friction between you and the slippery meat, and it helps you get leverage so that pulling off the skin is no problem. And once I've got 8 skinless drummies here, I'm going to give them a quick marinade. So I'll scoot them over to a medium bowl, then add in 35 grams of yogurt, 20 grams of salt, 2 grams of coriander, 2 grams cumin, 2 grams garam masala, and 10 grams of Kashmiri chili powder. This is a fruity, medium heat chili powder that mainly brings an epic red color to this dish, but if you don't have it, you could also sub in paprika with a small pinch of cayenne. Next, I'll jump in and just toss the chicken drumsticks with the yogurt and spices. Just like for the first 2 recipes, it's really important to add some kind of seasoning to your chicken before you drench it in a very flavorful curry sauce. Okay, once the gurt and spices are on this chicken, I'm going to move it over to the fridge to marinate while I build the rest of this dish. Up next, I'm going to drop a very generous dose of oil into a medium heat Dutch oven, then add in 325 grams of sliced yellow onions. I made sure to slice these onions into a rough julienne so that they would caramelize faster, exactly like I would for a French onion soup. Once in, I'm not going to add any salt because that slows down caramelization, and I'm going to cook these onions for about 10 minutes over medium heat to slowly, gently brown them. Let's cut some veggies in the meantime. First, I'll grab about 275 grams of fresh tomato and give it a very rustic chop. My God, look how that Lagerstrom 8-inch just lasers through that tomato skin, you guys. Link in description if you want one. Next, I'll rough chop 3 serrano chilies. Again, if you're not a chili head, flip out the serranos for a less hot green chili like poblano. Then finally, I'll take a knob of ginger and very rough chop it along with about 10 cloves of garlic. All of this stuff is gonna get pureed in a second, so we really just need chunks. Over at the stove, after about 10 minutes of frying, my onions have taken on some really nice caramelization. So from here, I'll add in my tomatoes, serrano chilies, garlic, and ginger. Then I'll stir things to combine and continue to fry for another 5 to 10 minutes. At this point, I want to continue to build extra layers of flavor into this curry by continuing to caramelize the onions and cooking out the moisture from the tomatoes until they get jammy and start to take on some color themselves. And once I got things pushed a little bit further here and my veggies are nice and caramelized, I'm going to move them over to my blender and spin them for about 1 minute until they're smooth-ish. There's no need for baby food smooth here. We just want to break things down so that they can melt into the sauce. If you don't have a blender, a food processor would also work. And there we go. Ooh, dude, don't smell it though. There's a ton of hot serranos in there. Oh my God. Back at the stove, I've got 100 grams of ghee melted over medium heat. So next I'll add in all of my pureed aromatic base, then refry it for about 10 to 15 minutes. This is the most important step that I was missing in all of my previous attempts. There's just something about frying this puree and caramelizing it in all of this ghee that brings special new flavors to the dish. Shout out to Your Food Lab for helping me figure this out. If you haven't heard of it, it's a pretty epic Indian cooking channel that's mostly in Hindi, but the food looks amazing. You should definitely check it out. Oh yeah, also at this point, add a small pinch of salt to help draw out any remaining moisture from the veg, then keep on cooking it until most of the water is cooked out and the aromatic chili base has taken on a deep reddish orange color like this. Next, I'll add in 5 grams cumin, 3 grams turmeric, 10 grams garam masala, 3 grams coriander, and 10 grams of Kashmiri chili powder. From here, I'm gonna fry the masala, or spice blend, with the refried aromatic base for about 3 minutes or until the spices are smelling insanely flavorful. And once again, you want the base to let out its oil. Next, I'm going to add in my marinated chicken drumsticks, then stir those into the curry base. At this point, all of the Indian mom recipes that I've read would tell you to continue to stir and cook this chicken in the spice base for like 10 to 20 minutes. I don't think that's the right move for 2 reasons. Number 1, in a Dutch oven, the spices can and probably would burn. And number 2, the chicken that I use is usually air-chilled chicken, meaning that it's not full of water, so you can't really cook it that way. If your chicken is very wet and lets out a lot of moisture when you add it into the pot, continue to cook it for about 10 minutes to boil some of that off. We don't want an overly wet curry. The sauce won't look right. Okay, next I'll add in 500 to 600 grams of water, or just enough to mostly submerge the drumsticks. Then I'll come back and scrape up the bottom of the pot one more time, just to make sure there aren't any spices stuck to the bottom. From here, I'll drop on a lid and simmer this over medium-low heat for 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, the chicken should be cooked through and starting to be shreddable. From here, we need to reduce the water out of this sauce until it starts to let out its oil one more time. That'll take about 15 more minutes, and it'll also allow the chicken to braise a bit more so that it becomes even more fall off the bone tender. I'll call the sauce done when it's reduced to the point that it's sitting below the halfway point of the drummies, and again, it's let out its insanely flavorful spiced oil. Before calling it done, I also need to take a couple of forks and check the chicken for tenderness. If it doesn't pull apart easily like this, you'll need to add some more water to your sauce and keep cooking the chicken until it is. To serve, I'll drop on top of some Indian basmati rice and then top the chicken with a big spoonful of the spicy aromatic sauce. Now let's taste it.
Man, the chicken just falls right off the bone, dude. That is so good. There's a good amount of heat in there too that's intense but not overwhelming. And then finally, the thing kind of crescendos into all these different layers of warm spice. I just love this dish. It's beautiful to look at, it's fun to cook, and it tastes amazing.
If you guys like this video, then oh man, you're gonna love the video linked on screen right here. It's a classic. Go ahead, click on it. Just do it. You're gonna love it.